Okay. As always, I have to move some things so I don't get distracted staring at myself. Hello, I'm Rachel. This is my book club. Welcome to the book club. It is called Vampires Are My Special Interest Book Club. It says it right on the tin. Don't gotta think about it. Don't gotta worry about it. This is about vampires. Welcome. We are finishing this book, Sisters of the Night. 2 stories left out of 14, and I'm excited to finish it and talk about all of the stories at once afterwards, like doing a final ranking. The last one was really fun, and I would love to do it again, so I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too. And afterwards, I'm probably going to do a couple more of those between book streams. Last time we read Buffy the Vampire Slayer literary articles because I can. And I had the PDFs because one day I went crazy on the Wayback Machine and downloaded everything I could find. I don't think anybody cared about those streams, but I had fun. I might do that again. I might do something else. Not sure. We'll see. But there's that to look forward to. And yeah. Sorry. I have recently broken up with my boyfriend, now ex. We only dated for a couple months, but I'm still listening to Casey Musgrave's fucking divorce album on repeat now because I'm insane and I'm sad and I need some vampires, and I just wanted to share it with the world even if nobody's gonna watch. This weekend kind of sucks, but hey, we have vampires in this book, and we're here together. If you're here, if anyone's here. So, let's go. Okay, it's called Merid and the Trail of Blood by George Alec Effinger. And this one has a lot of Arabic style words in it. It's an alternate universe, but it's very Middle Eastern. So please have patience with me while I try to say these words. I really did try, I promise. Okay. There is a saying, the Budayin hides from the light. You can interpret that any way you like, but I'm dissolute enough to know exactly what it means. There's a certain time of day that always makes me feel as if my blackened soul were just then under the special scrutiny of Allah in paradise. It happens in the gray winter mornings just as at dawn, when I've spent the entire night drinking in some awful hellhole. When I finally decide it's time to go home and I step outside, instead of the choking forgiveness of darkness, there is bright, merciless sun shining on my aching head. It makes me feel filthy and a little sick, as if I've been wallowing in a dismal gutter all night. I know I can get pretty god-darn wiped out, but I don't believe I've ever sunk to wallowing. At least, I don't remember if I did. And all the merchants setting up their stalls, and the souk, all the men and women rising for morning prayers, they all glare at me with that special expression. They know exactly where I've been. They know I'm drunk and irredeemable. They give freely of contempt that they'd been saving for a long time for someone as depraved and worthless as me. This is not even to mention the disapproving expression on Yusef's face last Tuesday when he opened the great wooden front door at home, or my slave, Kamuzu. Both of them knew enough not to say a word out loud, but I got the full treatment from their attitudes, particularly when Kamuzu started slamming down the breakfast things half an hour later, as if I could stand to eat. All I wanted to do was collapse and sleep, but no one in the household would allow it. It was part of my punishment. So that's how this adventure began. I reluctantly ate a little breakfast ignored the large quantity of orders, receipts, ledgers, and other correspondence on my desk, and sat back in a padded leather chair wishing my mortal headache would go away. Now, when I first had my brain wired, I was given a few experimental features. I can chip in a device that makes my body burn alcohol faster than the normal ounce an hour. That night had been a contest between me and my hardware. The liquor won. I could also chip in a pain-blocking daddy, but it wouldn't make me any more sober. For now, in the real world, I was as sick as a plague-stricken wharf rat. I watched a holo show about a sub-Saharan reforestation program, with the sound turned off. Before it was over, I lied to myself that I felt just a tiny bit better. I even pretended to act friendly toward Kamuzu. I forgave him, and I forgave myself for what I'd done the night before. I promised both of us that I'd never do it again. I laughed. Kamuzu didn't. He turned his back and walked out of the room without saying a word. It was obvious to me that it wasn't a good day to spend around the house. I decided to go back to the Budayin and open my nightclub at noon, a little early for the day shift. Even if I had to sit there by myself for a couple of hours, it would be better company than I had at home. About 12:15, Puolani, the beautiful real girl, came in. She was early for work, but she had always been one of the most dependable of the 5 dancers on the day shift. I said hello. Before she went to the dressing room, she sat down beside me at the bar. "You hear what happened to Crazy V, who works by Big Al's old Chicago?" "No," I said. "I can't keep up with what goes on with every girl, Deb, and sex change, and the Budayin. She turned up dead yesterday. They say they found her body all drained of blood, and she had 2 small puncture marks on her neck. It looks like some kind of vampire jumped on her or something. Fuck, how did I get it right the first time? Puolani said, shuddered. I closed my eyes and rubbed my throbbing temples. There are no such things as vampires, I said. There are no afrits, no jinn, no werewolves, no succubi, and no trolls. There has to be some other explanation for V. I recognized the woman's name, but I couldn't picture her face. Like what? I don't know. A murderer with an elaborate scheme to throw suspicion on a supernatural suspect, maybe? I don't think so, Puolani said. I mean, everything just fits. Uh-huh, I said. Puolani went into the back to change into her working outfit. I reached over the bar and filled a tall glass with ice, then poured myself a carbonated soft drink. Chai Ribka, my partner, arrived not long after. She owned half the club and acted as daytime barmaid. I was glad to see her because it meant that I didn't have to watch the place anymore. I rested my head on my arms and let the hangover headache do its throbbing worst. Nothing felt fatal until someone shook my shoulder. I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't go away. I sat up and saw Yasmin, one of the dancers. She was brushing her glistening black hair. "You hear about V?" she said. "Uh-huh." "You know, I warned V about staying out of that alley. She used to go home that way every night. That's what she gets for working at the old Chicago and going home that way. I must have told her a dozen times." I took a deep breath and let it out. "Yasmin, the poor girl didn't deserve to die just because she walked home through an alley." Yasmin cocked her head to one side and looked at me. "Yeah, I know, but still. You hear they think it was Sheba who killed her?" That was news to me. "Sheba?" I asked. "She worked here maybe 8 or 9 months ago? That Sheba?" Yasmin nodded. "She's over by Fatima and Nasir's these days, and she belongs there." Cheery wiped the bar beside me and tossed a coaster in front of Yasmin. "Why do you think it was Sheba who killed Crazy V?" Cheery asked. "'Cause," Yasmin said in a loud whisper, "V was killed by a vampire, right? And you never see Sheba in the daytime. Never. Have you? Think about it. Let me have some peppermint schnapps, Cheery." I glanced at Cheery, but she only shrugged. I turned back to Yasmin. "First, everybody's sure V was killed by a vampire, and now you're sure that the vampire is Sheba." Yasmin raised both hands and tried to look innocent. "I'm not making any of this up," she said. She scooped up her peppermint schnapps and went to sit beside Puolani. No customers had come in yet. "Well," I said to Cheery, "what do you think?" Cheery's expression didn't change. I don't think anything. Do I have to? Cheery's the only person in the Boudin with any sense, and that includes me. The afternoon passed slowly. The other 3 dancers, Lily, Kitty, and Baby, came in when they felt like it. We made a little money, sold a few drinks. The girls hustled some champagne cocktails. I listened to the same damn sick propaganda songs on the hollow system and watched my employees parade their talents. It was getting on toward dinner time when Lily and Yasmin got into an argument with 2 poor European marks. I strolled over toward their table, not because I care anything for marks. I generally don't. But because a bad enough argument might send the 2 guys out into the street and into somebody else's club. Marid, listen, Lily said. I held up a hand, interrupting her. Are you 2 gentlemen enjoying yourselves? I asked. They had puzzled looks on their faces, but they nodded. Some people are born marks, others achieve markdom, and some people have markdom thrust upon them. What's the problem? I said in a warning voice. I can hear you all the way across the bar. We're talking about V, Lily said. We were warning Letaro and Karoy to stay out of that alley. We were going to suggest a nice, safe place where we could go, Yasmin said. She tried to look innocent enough. Yasmin hasn't been innocent since her baby teeth fell out. Look, you 2, I said, meaning my 2 fun-loving hustlers. Let me clear this up right now. I'll call the morgue and find out what they know about Crazy V. You're gonna call the morgue? Lily said. She was suddenly very interested. Get back to work, I said. I went back to my seat at the bar. I unclipped the phone from my belt and murmured the com code of the Boudin's morgue. The medical examiner there, Dr. Besharati, had helped me with a couple of other matters over the years. He was normal enough for a guy who worked surrounded by dead bodies all day. He liked to tootle a jazz trumpet in between autopsies. That was his kick. I got one of his assistants. The coroner was busy putting brains into jars or something. Yeah, medical examiner's office. I wanted to get some information about one of the deceased currently in your custody. You a family member? I blinked. Sure, I said. Okay then, what do you want? Young woman killed last night in an alley in the Boudin. Her name was V. Yeah? He wasn't making it any easier for me. We were just wondering if you have determined the cause of death yet. There was a long pause while the assistant went off to investigate. When he returned, he said, well, we ain't got to her yet, but she died on account she was murdered. Slashed throat, heavy loss of blood. That'll do it every time. I grimaced. I could only hope they'd be a little gentler with V's real family. Grimaced. I can never remember. It might be both. Could you tell me, were there any puncture wounds on the throat? I told you we ain't got to her yet. Don't know. Call again tomorrow, maybe. We ought to have her on the slab by then. Do you need to come watch? I just hung up after leaving my comm code. I was sure that Lily would have happily viewed the autopsy, but even if I couldn't quite remember who V was, she probably deserved better treatment than that. The 2 European marks got up and left the club about a half hour later. Yasmin came and leaned against the bar near me. She was brushing her hair again. What jerks, she said. They're all jerks, is the general opinion. I called about V, I said. No vampire. She was just murdered in the alley. Huh, Lily said dubiously, like she could bite herself in her own neck. I spread my hands. They haven't confirmed the business about the puncture wounds. You're just exaggerating all of this way out of proportion. Yasmin looked at me knowingly. We'll see, she said. She turned to Lily, who nodded her agreement. Dealing with my employees is sometimes very hard on my nerves. I thought about having my first drink of the day, but I didn't. I went out to get something to eat instead. Now, oh God. Hold on, I can say this name. Chiriga. Oh. Chiri. Not cheery. Chiri. Chiriga. Oh God, where was I? Now, Chiriga's is about halfway between the eastern gate of the Boudin and the western end, the cemetery. There are plenty of spaces to eat along the street, and on this particular occasion, I decided to head toward Kyoshi's. I hadn't walked far before I saw the landlady. Oh boy, I muttered. Safia, the lamb lady, is a regular feature of the Budayin, one of our favorite odd characters. She's harmless, but she can talk at you so long you're sure you'll never get away. She lives on money people give her, and she sleeps wherever anybody will let her. I've let her stay in my club a few times. She's completely honest, just addled a bit. That's why I was surprised to see her wearing a lot of expensive-looking jewelry. She had on 8 or 10 silver rings, 2 silver necklaces, silver earrings, and silver bracelets and bangles from her wrists halfway to her elbows. Where'd you get all that, Safia? I asked. Watch out for the lamb, she said in a hoarse voice. She used to have a lamb that followed her around the Budayin, but it was accidentally killed. Now Safia has an imaginary lamb. I'd almost bumped into it. Sorry, I said. Isn't this nice stuff, she said. She jingled her bracelets. I found it all in the trash. In the trash? The silver she was wearing must have been worth 400 or 500 kayam. Where? Oh, it's all gone now, Safia said. I took it. I'll show you, though, if you want to see. I followed her because I was curious. She led me to the back of a whitewashed 2-story apartment building where 4 trash cans had been upended. Garbage was strewn all over the narrow passageway between buildings, but we didn't find any more jewelry. When Safia started showing off all the silver, she would make herself a target for robbery, or worse. I decided to mention this to one of my connections in the police department. They'd keep an eye on Safia. With Crazy V's unsolved murder the night before, I guessed there'd be a stronger police presence in the Budayin tonight. I'd hate to see the lamb lady become the killer's second victim. However, the rest of the day passed quietly. Nothing happened to Safia, and nothing happened to me. I went home, trimmed my beard, took a long shower, and sat down at my desk to get some of my paperwork done. After a while, Kamuzu interrupted me. The master of the house wishes you to meet with him in an hour. Yea, Sidi, he said. I nodded. The master of the house was my great-grandfather, Friedlander Bey, who controlled much of the illicit activities in the city. He was a very powerful man, so powerful that he also found it profitable to control the rise and fall of certain nearby nations. It was like a hobby with him. 45 minutes later, I was dressed the way Papa liked me to dress, standing at the door to his office. It was guarded by Habib and Labib, Papa's huge, silent bodyguards. I wasn't going in until they felt like letting me go in. Tariq, Friedlander Bey's secretary and valet, came out and noticed me. I hope you haven't been waiting long, he said. I shrugged. I've just been watching these 2 guys. You know, they don't move at all. They don't even breathe. How do they manage that? Tariq did the smart thing and ignored me. He ushered me into Papa's inner office. Friedlander Bey reclined on a lacquered divan. He indicated that I should... Divan? Yeah. He indicated that I should seat myself across from him. Between us was a table loaded down with trays of food and fruit, juices, and silver coffee things. We chatted informally while we drank the customary cups of coffee. Then, suddenly, Papa was all business. You are spending too much time in the Budayin, he said. But oh, Sheikh, you gave me the nightclub. He raised a hand. I shut up. There are more important matters. Representatives from the Empire of Parthia will be arriving tomorrow. They wish our support in their expansion onto Kush. I didn't even know I do not believe we will give them what they desire. Indeed, I think it is time that Parthia be, shall we say, disunited. But what could I do but agree? We discussed these weighty affairs for some time. At last, Papa relaxed. He took an apple and a small paring knife. You called the medical examiner today, my darling, he said. I was astonished. Yes, Sheikh. You are interested in the death of the young dancer. It is of no importance. Maybe it's because I used to be a poor street kid myself, but the lives and deaths of the people of the Budayin matter more to me. Friedlander Bey went on. Your employees believe in vampires. He was amused. Lieutenant Giragosian of the police does not. Here his amusement ended. You will not pursue this further. It is a waste of time, and it is unseemly for you to concern yourself with what is, after all, chiefly a Christian myth. Crazy V's body in the morgue was no myth. And in the Maghreb, the far western part of North Africa where I'd grown up, there are still stories of the Gola. She is a female jinn, very big and strong, sometimes with goat's feet, and covered with hair like an unshorn sheep. Her trick is that she speaks sweetly and gently to people, and then kills them and drinks their blood. The Gola is usually described as having those familiar, long, fierce canine teeth and eyes like blazing fire. Still, I wasn't about to mention any of this to my benefactor. You and I will share luncheon tomorrow with the Parthians, Papa said. Forget about the murdered woman, your nightclub, and the Boudin for a while. As you wish, oh Sheikh, I said. Yeah, sure, I thought. I returned to my suite and relaxed with a detective novel by Luffy God, my favorite Palestinian mystery writer. He'd been dead for decades, so there was no new Gad books, but the old ones were so good I can enjoy them again and again. This one was called The Deep Cradle, and if I remembered correctly, it was the one in which Gad's dark and dangerous detective, Al-Qadian, nope, I keep adding a D in there. Al-Qadiani, yeah. Ended up in a Brulandi, a thing made up for this world, I think, with almost every bone in his body broken. It's amazing sometimes how resilient those paperback detectives are. I wish I knew how they did it. The phone on my belt rang. That meant the call was probably from one of my disreputable friends and associates. Otherwise, the desk phone would have rung. I unclipped it and murmured, Maharba. Marid? Marid? It's Yasmin. And guess what? She actually waited for me to guess. I didn't bother. You know the boys' club of yours? She said. I have a small army of kids who look out for me in the Boudin. Watch me and make sure I'm not being followed by the cops or anything. I throw them a few Kayam now and then. What about them? I asked. One of them's dead, and it looks like Sheba all over again. Kid's throat is torn open, and before you say anything, I saw the gosh darn puncture marks this time. From fangs. So you're wrong. It bothered me that her notion about Sheba was more important to her than the death of that poor boy. Who was it? I asked. Anybody you know? Yeah, stupid. Sheba, like I've been telling you. I took in a deep breath and let it out slowly. No, not her. The boy. Who was it? I could almost hear her shrug. They have names, Morid? I mean, how would I know? I closed my eyes. Call the police, Yasmin. Chyri already did. All right, I've got to go now. Something else, Marid. Lily and me and this girl you don't know, Naka, and Sheba are all going to have supper after work tonight at Martyrs of Democracy. Anyway, Sheba comes in real late with this lame excuse about having this admiral or something buy her one bottle of champagne after another, even though the night shift had come in. What's an admiral doing in the Boudin in the first place? And I know Sheba's no day shift girl, so she's all out of breath, and she seems really nervous, not just to me. You can ask Lily about it. And you know what? When we ordered the food, she asked me please not to get the pork strings and garlic sauce. That's what I always order. So I asked her why, and she said her stomach was bothering her, like maybe she was pregnant or had the flu or something, and the smell of the garlic would make her sick. Garlic. Marid. Get it? I opened my eyes. Maybe it wasn't the garlic, sweetheart. Maybe she just remembered that none of you good Muslim women ought to be eating pork and strings or anyhow. There was a pause while Yasmin figured if I was kidding her or not. She let it go. How much more proof do you need, Marid? She asked angrily. You're really being a jackass about this. I heard her slam the phone down. I put mine back on my belt and shook my head. Behind me, I heard Kamuzu say, if I may say so, Ya Sidi, I have noticed a tendency on your part to hesitate to get involved in such matters until you yourself are personally threatened. In the meantime, innocent lives can be lost. If you think back, I'm sure you will recall the voice of my conscience, I said warily, turning to face him. Thank you so much. Are you telling me I should take this vampire stuff seriously? Especially after Papa specifically told me to ignore it? You see, Kamuzu wasn't merely my slave. He'd been a gift from Freelander Bay, someone to spy on me and report back to Papa. He shrugged. The people of the Budayin have no one to turn to but you. So if I pursued this, you'd help me? Kamuzu spread his hands. Oh no, the master of the house has made his feelings clear. Nevertheless, you could telephone Lieutenant Gozian and learn what he knows. I did just that. I called the cop shop. Lieutenant Gozian's office, a man said. I'd like to speak to the lieutenant, please. This is Merid Audron, son of a bitch. The lieutenant isn't available right now. Who's this then? This is his executive assistant, Sergeant Katavina. Geez, the laziest, most easily bought cop in the city. How his star had risen. Look, Katavina, I said. There have been 2 murders in the Budayin in the last couple of days. One was a dancer, a real girl named V, and the other was a boy. Both had their throats torn out. Know anything about that? A pause. Sure we do. He was playing it cagey. Dumb cagey. Look, pal, you want me to have Friedlander Bay send over a couple of guys to question you personal? Take it easy, Audron. There was a gratifying hint of anxiety in Katavina's voice. What are you looking for? First, what's the ID on the boy? Kid named Mahdi Ilmala, 11 years old. I knew him. He was one of my friends. I felt a familiar coldness in my gut. What about puncture wounds on the neck? How'd you know? Yeah. That's in the report. Now, I got to tell the lieutenant you called. What do you want me to tell him when he asks me what you're up to? I sighed. I wasn't happy about this. Tell him I'm going to catch his vampire for him. Vampire? Audron, what are you, crazy? I hung up instead of replying. Kamuzu's expression was difficult to read. I didn't know if he approved or not. I don't know why I cared. One piece of advice, Yasidi, if you'll permit me. It would be a mistake to begin your investigation of this woman Sheba tonight. Uh-huh. Why do you say that? He shrugged again. If I had to hunt a vampire, I'd do it during the daylight. Good point. The next day, I arose at dawn, made my ritual ablutions and prayed, then set out to begin serious investigations. If Kamuzu wasn't planning to offer any direct assistance, meaning that he wouldn't even drive me over to the Budayin, then I'd have to rely on Bill, the cab driver. Now, if you know Bill, you know how amusing the concept of relying on him is. He's as dependable as a 2-legged footstool. I phoned him from the bathroom because I didn't want Kamuzu to overhear me. I told Bill to pick me up just outside the high walls that surrounded Freelander Bay's estate. Bill didn't remember who I was for a while, but that's usual. Bill's about as aware as a sleeping skink. He chose that for himself years ago, buying an expensive bod mod that constantly brazed his brain in a very frightening high-tech hallucinogen. It would have driven most people to suicide within a handful of days. In Bill's case, I understand it sort of settled him down. On the way from Papa's mansion to the eastern gate of the Budayin, Bill and I had a disjointed conversation about the imminent war with the state of Gadsden. I eventually figured out that he was having some kind of flashback. Before he came to the city, he'd lived in America, in the part now called Sovereign Deseret. His skink brain let him believe he was already there. It was all right because he found the Budayin easily enough. I gave him enough money so that he'd wait for me and drive me home after I finished the morning's legwork. I started up the street in the direction of the cemetery. I didn't know yet what I wanted to do first. Why did I have to go on? What did I have to go on? 2 homicide victims, that's all, with nothing tangible connecting them except in the similarity of method. I had, on one hand, my employees' overheated warning that a vampire was loose around here, and on the other hand, my absolute disbelief in the supernatural. There was nothing to do but call Chiri. I knew I'd be... the amount of ways I've pronounced this woman's name. It's all the same person. His business friend. They own the place together. I knew it'd be waking her up. I heard her pick up her phone and say, yeah? Chyri, it's Merid. I'm not waking you up, am I? No, her voice was real darn cold. Sorry. Listen, do you know where Sheba lives? No, and I don't care either. Then who do we know who could give me the address? I think I need to just drop by and ask Sheba a couple of things. There was a pause. Chyri was being angry. Yasmin would know. Or Lily. Yasmin or Lily. I probably should have called them first. Another pause. Probably. I grimaced. Sorry, Chyri. Go back to... Chyri? Go back to sleep. I'll see you later. She didn't say anything before she slammed the phone down. I called Yasmin next, but I didn't get an answer. That didn't surprise me. I remember from the days when Yasmin and I lived together that she was one of the best little sleepers that Allah ever invented. She could sleep through any major catastrophe except a missed meal. I gave up after listening to the phone ring 12.5 times, and then I called Lily. She was just as unhappy to be roused as Chyri, but her tone changed when she found out it was me. Lily has been waiting for me to call for a long time. She's a gorgeous sex change, and she was well aware that I've never had much success with real women. Can't help but think that that was supernatural sci-fi transphobia. So, fuck that guy. She was less happy when I told her I just wanted another girl's address in Comcode. I heard ice through the ether again, but she finally gave me the information. It turned out that Sheba didn't live too far from my club. And one other thing, Lily said. We checked by the Red Light Lounge. Sheba couldn't have been late to supper on account of some guy buying her drinks. She doesn't work daytimes. She's never worked daytimes, just like we said. So she lied. You just don't see her around when the sun is up. I'll keep that in mind, I said. So what you want to get next to that for? If you're spending too much time all by yourself, honey, I'll help you out. I didn't need this now. Jasmine would scratch your eyes out, Lily. I've only been protecting you. Huh. Yasmin don't remember how to spell your name, Merid. She slammed the phone down, too. I decided it wouldn't be a good idea to set foot in my own business today. I'd probably be slashed to ribbons. I found Sheba's apartment building and went up to the second floor. It was an old place with a thin, worn carpet runner on the stairs. The paint on the walls hung down in grimy, blowy strips. Sheba's front door was painted a dark reddish brown, the color of a blood stain on clothing. I knocked. There was no response. Well, Sheba was a boudin hustler. She was probably asleep. I knocked louder and called her name. Finally, I unclipped my phone again and murmured her comm code into it. I could hear the ringing from within the apartment. It took me perhaps 1.5 minutes to get past her lock. The first thing I learned was that Sheba wasn't home. The second was that it appeared she hadn't been around for a while. Several envelopes had been pushed beneath her door. One had been closed only with a rubber band. I opened it. It contained 100 kayam in 10 kayam bills. And a note from some admirer. Clothes, jewelry, stuffed animals, all sorts of things were strewn across the floor of the apartment's large room. There was a mattress with a single sheet lying tipped up against the wall. The room's only window was standing open, water-stained yellow curtains blowing in a warm breeze. Below the window was another heap of clothing and personal articles. I brushed the curtains aside and looked out. Below me was a narrow alley leading crookedly in the direction of 9th Street. The light was on in the bathroom. When I looked in there, it was as much a mess as the other room. It seemed to me that Sheba had been in a hell of a hurry, had grabbed up a few things, and had gotten out of the apartment as fast as she could. I couldn't guess why. I looked more closely at what she'd left behind. Near the bathroom was a pile of cellophane and cardboard scraps that Sheba had kicked together. I sorted through the stuff and saw quickly that it was mostly packaging material ripped from several personality modules. I was familiar enough with the Blaze Brain field to know that some of the moddies Sheba had collected were not your regular commercial releases. Sheba fancied black market titles and very dangerous ones too. She liked illegal underground moddies that fed her feelings of superiority and power. While she was wearing them, she'd become these programmed people, and her behavior could range from the merely vicious to the downright sinister and deadly. She could almost certainly become capable of murder. I recalled that months ago when she worked for me at Chiri's, she was almost always chipped into some Mahdi or other. That wasn't unusual among the dancers, though. I was sure that Sheba wasn't using these hardcore Mahdis back then, at least not at work. Something had happened in the meantime, something that had drastically changed her, and not for the better. I put some of the wrappers in my pocket and went back to the window. A niggling thought had been bothering me, and I looked outside again. My attention was drawn to the 4 trash cans below. They weren't just any trash cans. Safia, the lamb lady, had brought me here. She had found all her silver jewelry in Sheba's alley. I took another look around Sheba's shabby apartment. There were dead flowers shoved into one corner, several books thrown together on the floor, and shattered glass everywhere. I found another double handful of abandoned jewelry, a heap of pendants and necklaces, cheap stuff. Most were decorated with familiar symbols, all jumbled together. There were a couple of Christian crosses, Islamic crescents, and items with Quranic inscriptions, a Star of David, an Ankh, Buddhist, Hindu, and other Asiatic religious tokens, occult designs, Native American figures, and others I wasn't able to identify. These were the only things I saw that might have had some connection to the vampire mythology, but I still discounted them. The things might just have been left behind like the rest of the jewelry. I couldn't be sure there was any particular significance to them. Nothing else set off a bell in my highly perceptive, crime-solving mind. The Mahdis were the best clue, and so my next stop was Layla's mod shop on 4th Street. I was surprised that Layla herself wasn't in when I got there, but I was relieved too. Layla is almost impossible to deal with. Instead, there was a young woman standing behind the counter. She smiled at me. She didn't seem crazy at all. She was either wearing a Mahdi that force-fed her a pleasant personality, or something was definitely not right here. This was not a shop where you met people under the control of their own unaugmented selves. "Can I help you?" she asked me in English. I don't speak much English, but I have an electronic add-on that takes care of that for me. I kept the language Daddy chipped in almost all the time because there was a lot of important English-speaking people in the city. I took the wrappers from my pocket. "Sell any of these lately?" She shuffled the cellophane around on the counter for a few seconds. "Nope," she said brightly. I was positive now that I wasn't dealing with her real personality. She was just too gosh darn perky. "How do you know?" I asked. She shrugged. This shop and its owner are much too concerned about uploading local ordinances to sell illegal bootleg Mahdis. I almost choked. "Yeah, you're right," was all I said. "Anything else I can help you with?" She was deeply concerned, I could tell. That was some Mahdi Layla had found for her. "I'll just browse a bit." I went toward the bins of Mahdis based on characters from old books and hollow shows. For some dumb reasons, I couldn't come up with the name of the villain I was looking for. "You know what a vampire is?" "Sure," she said. "We had to watch that movie in a class in high school." She made a scornful expression. 20th century literature. "What was the vampire's name again?" "Lestat. They made us watch that movie in another classic airport it was. None of us could figure out what they had to do with the real world. I like modern literature better." I'll bet she did. Lestat wasn't who I was searching for. I browsed through the bins for half an hour before I came across a set of vampire character Mahdis. The package had been torn open. I took it to the counter and showed it to the young woman. "Know anything about this?" I asked. We are mostly through the story, and I just looked up and realized I could have been small this whole time. Not that anybody's noticed. She was upset. "We don't break sets open," she said. "We wouldn't have done that." The Dracula Mahdi was missing, leaving the Jonathan Harker, Lucy Westenra, Dr. Van Helsing, and Renfield Mahdis. I gave a little involuntary shudder. I didn't want to meet the person who'd be eager to chip in Renfield. "Do you suppose someone could have shoplifted the missing Mahdi?" I asked. I almost wished I hadn't said it. The young woman paled. I could see how abhorrent the entire idea was to her. "Perhaps," she murmured. The word she used was perhaps, not maybe. That had to be the software talking. Forget it, I said, coming to a decision. A decision. I'll buy the rest of the package. Even though part of it's been stolen, you know I'm not authorized to offer you a discount. It took me a little while longer to persuade her to sell me the things, and I was already chipping in Dr. Van Helsing, that fearless old vampire hunter, as I left the shop and headed back toward the eastern gate. The first thing Audron noted, this is in italics, so it's the vampire guy talking. The first thing Audron noticed was that he was somewhat taller and a good deal older. There was a painful twinge in his left shoulder, but he decided it wouldn't hinder him too much. He also felt very Dutch. He, Van Helsing, was from Amsterdam after all. Audron's own consciousness lurked in a tiny, hidden-away area submerged beneath the overlay of Van Helsing. There he wondered what feeling Dutch meant. It was probably just some programmer's laziness. That person had known that Van Helsing was Dutch, but had not bothered to include specific Dutchness. It was a weakness that Audron despised in poorly written commercial Mahdi's. It did not take long for Audron's muscles and nerves to compensate for the differences between his own physical body and the one the Mahdi's manufacturer imagined. As long as the Mahdi was chipped in, Audron could move, feel, and respond as Van Helsing. There was also an annoying nervous flutter in his right eyelid, and Audron sincerely hoped it would go away as soon as he popped the Mahdi out. Van Helsing was still heading east on the sidewalk. Audron preferred walking in the middle of the street. As he approached the arched gate of the Boudienne, Van Helsing considered the things they had found in Sheba's apartment. Now, with his special knowledge, the evidence took on new significance. How could Audron be expected to appreciate the absolute horror of what he'd discovered in the abandoned apartment? How could Audron know that the dead flowers, roses, were shunned by all vampires? That the broken glass came from shattered mirrors around the room? That the sacred symbols were powerful weapons against the undead? More compelling yet were the books and papers left with seeming carelessness on the floor. They had looked harmless enough to Audron, but Van Helsing knew that within their pages were terrible, evil passages describing rituals through which a living human being could become a vampire, and others that gave instructions for inviting demons to invade and possess one's immortal soul. Though Audron's inaction, through his inaction, the situation had become dire and deadly. More than human lives were at stake now. An unholy monster was loose among the unsuspecting people of the Boudienne. Once again, it was left to Dr. Van Helsing to restore peace and sanctity if he could. Cursing Audron for a fool, Van Helsing quickened his pace. Audron should have guessed the truth, even when the young boy had been attacked. Dracula's victim, Lucy, had preyed largely on children. Van Helsing felt an uncomfortable stirring of his emotions. Although he'd never admit the fact to anyone, he was aware of his barely sublimated lust toward female vampires, and now he'd been called upon to battle a new one. He shook his head at the ultimate moment, he knew he would be strong enough. He passed through the arch and onto the beautiful Boulevard Il Jamil. Bill, the cab driver, was still waiting for him. He tapped Van Helsing on the shoulder. Ready to go, he asked. God and Himmel, Van Helsing exclaimed. That's easy for you to say, Bill said. Get in. Van Helsing and Audron glanced at the taxi. Together they reached up and popped the Mahdi out. The guy's a total loon, I muttered as I slid into the car's back seat. Gotta complain about me, pal? Bill asked. No, I said. I'm talking about this Van Helsing jerk. He sees deadly, gruesome creatures everywhere he looks. Bill shrugged. Well, hell, so do I, but I just steer around them. I thought that was a pretty sensible attitude. Bill delivered me to the front gate of Freelander Bay's estate. I hurried inside and up to my suite just in time for Kamuzu to remind me about the important luncheon meeting scheduled with Papa and the political representatives of some darn place. I showered again, feeling just a little sullied after letting that repressed Van Helsing character occupy my body and mind. I put on my best galabia and kafia, going so far as to belt a gorgeous jeweled ceremonial dagger in front at the waist. I looked good, and I knew Papa would be pleased. The luncheon itself was fine, just fine. I don't even remember what we ate, but there were tons of it, and the delegation from Parthia was appropriately unimpressed. I'm hungry. I need to eat something. Not immediately, just... There's a lot of food. Lots of it. Man, I want some food, actually. I'm hungry. Anyway, we'll be fine. More importantly, though, was that they were appropriately intimidated. I sat in my chair and looked thoughtful, while Friedlander Bay explained to them the facts of life here in the early years of the 23rd century of the Christian era. What it all amounted to was that the Parthians pretended to be grateful after being denied the help they'd come for. They even tried to bribe Papa further by guaranteeing him exclusive influence with the victorious side in the brand new Silesian revolt. I missed that word when I was looking up how to say words. Silesian? Since no one at that moment could predict what party would end up in power, and since Papa had little interest in nations beyond the Islamic realm, and since everyone in the room, including Habib and they look like you say them exactly the same, but you don't. So you don't say Habib and Labib. You say Habib and Labib. Okay. Knew that the Parthians couldn't deliver on their promise in the first place. We acted as if they hadn't said a word. It was an embarrassing blunder on their part, but Friedlander Bay handled it all with grace and assurance. He just waved to have the coffee and kataifi brought in. Papa's extremely fond of kataifi, a Greek dessert something like baklava, except it looks like shredded wheat. It may be his only worldly weakness. With all the formal greetings and salutations and invitations and flatteries and thank yous and blessings and leave-takings, it was about 5 o'clock before I was able to return to my rooms. I started to tell Kamuzu what had gone on, but naturally he already knew all about it. He even had a little advice for me concerning the people of Kush, who no doubt would soon strike back against the weakened Parthians. Fine, I said impatiently. Thank you, Kamuzu. I don't know what I'd do without you, if you'll just excuse me. Am I supposed to say it, Parthians? Bessie, I don't remember. I don't even know if I looked it up. Good Lord. Whatever. Fine, I said impatiently. Thank you, Kamuzu. I don't know what I'd do without you, if you'll just excuse me. The family of the young murdered boy said they were sorry you couldn't come to the funeral. They know how fond of you he'd been. I explained that you'd been detained by the master of the house. I regretted missing the service. I wish I could have at least been at the ceremony to offer my condolences. I think I'll just relax now, I said. I'm going to rest for a while, and then I'm going to see how my nightclub is doing without me. That is all right, isn't it? I mean, I'm allowed to go down there this evening, aren't I? Kamuzu gave me a blank stare for a second or two. I had been advised otherwise. Ya Sidi, he said. Oh, too bad. Then I was looking at his back. You have 2 visitors waiting to speak with you, a man and a boy. They've been here since 2 o'clock. In the anteroom? All this time? I didn't want to see anyone else, but I couldn't just tell these people to go home and come back tomorrow. All right, Kamuzu wasn't paying any attention. He was already going toward my office. I followed, trying not to let all this power go to my head. When I saw who was waiting for me, I was startled. It was Bill, the cab driver, and a boy from the Boudin. Bill was standing up with his back to the room, his hands stretched up as high against the wall as he could reach. Don't ask me why. The kid's name was Musa Ali, and his dirty face was streaked with tears. He was sitting quietly in a chair. I felt sorry for him, having to spend all those hours alone with Bill. I wouldn't have done it. When I came in, they both began speaking at once. They talked fast and furiously. I couldn't make any sense out of it. I signaled to Bill to shut up, and then I let Musa Ali explain things. My sister, he said, his eyes wide with fear. She's taken her. I looked at Bill. The vampire, he said. Suddenly he was very calm and matter-of-fact. His hands were still raised high, but I didn't hold that against him. You took what you could get with Bill. Between the two of them, I got an idea of the story. Not the truth, necessarily, but the story. Apparently, just at noon, Sheba, in her vampire form, had stolen another child, Musa Ali's 6-year-old sister. Bill had tried to interfere, and a tremendous fight had erupted. On one side was this burly, full-grown man, and on the other was a short nightclub dancer burdened with a struggling child in her arms. Bill was covered with dark bruises and bloody cuts and scratches, so I didn't really have to ask which way the conflict had gone. She turned into a bunch of mist, Bill said, shrugging. He sounded apologetic. I couldn't fight a bunch of mist, could I? She just floated away on the breeze. Reminded me of that time this guy from Tunis tried to treat me out of my fare, and just then I heard this music from heaven that was too high-pitched for normal humans to hear, see? So I turned around as fast as I could, but he was trying to get out of the cab, so then I stopped listening to Bill. Mist? I asked Musa Ali. Uh-huh, the boy said. So now I was tracking down a fog lady. A murderous vampire fog lady. Suddenly, I really wanted another piece of Kataifi. Yeah. It was getting late. I returned quickly to my apartment to change clothes again and pick up a few items I thought might be useful. One of these things was the Van Helsing Mahdi. After all, the excitable Dutch fanatic knew more about hunting vampires than I ever would. I just had to try to maintain a little rational control to offset Van Helsing's own serious hang-ups. I avoided Kamuzu and hurried back to Bill and Musa Ali, still waiting in my office. With some difficulty, we managed to slip out of the house without any direct interference from Friedlander Bay's staff, and I gave Bill the order to drive us back to the Budayin. First, I take you over there, Bill complained. Then I bring you back. Then I go home. Then I come back here. Now we go over there again. Maybe I'll be lucky, and we'll all get killed tonight. I don't do this driving thing because I enjoy it, you know. Bill can trap you that way, by fooling you into asking the next obvious question. That always leads into an even more bizarre rant, and I've promised myself not to get suckered in anymore. I didn't ask him what he wanted me to ask. Are you taking me home? Musa Ali asked. I can't go home until I find my sister. He was a brave kid. You can go home, I said. We'll find your sister. Okay, he said. He was brave, but he wasn't a fool. We're going to the cemetery, Bill, I said. It's the only logical place to look for Sheba. They won't let me into the cemetery, pal, he said. Who won't? The dead people. They won't let me into the cemetery because I'm American. They don't have dead people in America, I asked. I had already forgotten my promise to myself. Oh, sure they do, Bill said. But the dead people here in the city still hold it against Americans that they have the wrong unlucky number. It's not 13C, like Americans believe, because I stopped listening. I reached up and chipped the Van Helsing Mahdi in and said, and then it turns into italics for a while. Spoilers. There was another moment of disorientation, but it passed quickly. Stakes, Van Helsing said loudly. We need sharp wooden stakes. How could Audron have forgotten them? We have to stop and find some. Don't worry about stakes, Bill said calmly. Got 'em in the trunk. I got some in case I ever get a tent. Van Helsing was wise enough not to pursue it any further. Because Van Helsing wasn't as familiar with the city as Audron, he didn't notice immediately that Bill, for all his many years of experience, was getting pretty darn lost. The probable explanation was that his invisible evil temptresses were leading him astray. Both Van Helsing and Audron would have understood that. Instead, though, the vampire hunter stared out the taxi's window, watching the neighborhood slide by. Time passed, and the sun dropped silently toward the horizon. It was almost dark when Bill finally drove past the Budayin's eastern gate. He jammed on the brakes, and Van Helsing and he jumped out of the car. More time was spent as Bill searched for the trunk key. At last they armed themselves with the stakes. They couldn't find a hammer, and Bill carried an old, dead battery that could be used for pounding purposes. We'll need something to cut off Sheba's head, too, Van Helsing said in a worried voice. We'll need to get a large cleaver and garlic to stuff into her mouth. Bill nodded. There's an all-night convenience store on our way. Van Helsing still seemed apprehensive. Sheba will be at her full power soon. Well, Bill said, smiling broadly, so am I. That didn't do very much to reassure his companion. There were 16 blocks between the eastern gate and the cemetery, the length of the street, the width of the Budayin. They hurried as fast as they could, but Bill had never been very agile, and Van Helsing was not a young man anymore. They pushed through the crowds of local folk and foreign tourists with growing desperation. But by the time they arrived at their goal, the sun had set. It was night. They would have to face the full fury of the vampire's power. Have no fear, Van Helsing said. This isn't the first time I've challenged the undead on their own territory. You have nothing to worry about. That's easy for you to say, Bill said. You don't have to worry about the ground opening up in horrible fissures right in front of you. Van Helsing paused. Bill, he said at last, the ground isn't opening up. Bill put a finger alongside his nose. No, you're right, he confided, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to worry about it. Van Helsing looked up to heaven, where God was watching. Come on, he told Bill. We mustn't be too late to save the little girl. They arrived at the cemetery. No one else was nearby. Van Helsing saw the flowers and other offerings on the ground near where, Matidi Ilmala had been laid to rest. The boy's parents couldn't afford an above-ground tomb, so he'd been interred in a small oven-like vault built onto one of the cemetery's red brick walls. Oh my God, Bill cried. He motioned toward the back of the graveyard. Van Helsing turned and looked where Bill was pointing. He saw Sheba, dressed in a long, filthy black shift. Her hair was wildly disheveled and matted with leaves and twigs. There were streaks of dirt on her face and bare arms. She stared at Van Helsing and snarled. Even from that distance, the Dutchman could see the great, long canine teeth, the mark of the vampire. It's her, Van Helsing said in a quiet voice. You mean, it's she, Bill said. Or what remains of her earthly body, now inhabited by something of unspeakable foulness. Take warning. Remember that she has the strength of a dozen or more normal people. Beneath Van Helsing's overwhelming presence, Audron realized that the vampire body was constructed with an endocrine controller, letting a flood of adrenaline loose in Sheba's bloodstream. Whoever was correct, Audron or Van Helsing, believer in natural law or in evil magic, it made no difference. The ultimate effect was the same. You know, Bill said thoughtfully, she wouldn't be half bad looking if she just fixed herself up a little. Van Helsing did not deign to reply. He moved toward Sheba, feeling terror, determination, and an odd longing mixed together. Sheba stood before a large whitewashed tomb, its marble front panel removed and cast aside. This was where she'd taken up residence after leaving behind her human dwelling place. There was a vile stench emanating from the tomb. Nevertheless, Van Helsing summoned his courage and stepped closer. He heard small rustling noises, and behind Sheba he saw movement. It had to be Musa Ali's sister, still alive, but bound and made captive by this loathsome creature. Thanks be to all the angels that we are yet in time, he said. Sheba did not cry out or utter any verbal challenges. It was as if she'd lost the power of speech. Instead, she made harsh, guttural animal noises deep in her throat. Unbind the child and let her go free, Van Helsing demanded. Once again, Sheba bared her perilous fangs and hissed at them, not like a snake, but like a giant feral cat. Then she rushed forward, more swiftly than even Van Helsing had anticipated, and leaped on him, reaching for his unprotected throat with her clawed fingers and savaging him with her demon teeth. Bill hurried to Van Helsing's defense. Not again, he said. Not another one. What? Van Helsing asked. Another what-you-call-it. An abomination. Yeah, bloodthirsty, too. Bad luck always comes in threes, you know. So the third one is going to be a real showstopper. Bill attacked first, clouding the hideous thing with the strength he had. The blow had little effect. Bill lurched backwards, shaking his injured hand. His enemy was very tall, towering over him in a confident slouch. Despite his mental and physical handicaps, Bill was a better boxer than his opponent. He had a quicker punch, and his bob and weave was deft by comparison. Again and again, Bill struck, but for all the pain he was causing himself, and for the complete lack of results he was achieving against his foe, Bill might as well have been beating up the brick wall. Meanwhile, Van Helsing had as much as he could handle with Sheba. She fought like a cornered beast, ripping and tearing and biting at him. He ordered her again to release the young girl. Then he tried to reason with Sheba. Finally, he resorted to threats. Nothing worked. She was no longer human, no longer susceptible to his powers of persuasion. He was covered with his own blood when he finally managed to throw Sheba to the ground. He'd put a foot behind one of hers, then shoved her shoulder heavily. She toppled backward, shrieking in incoherent rage. Van Helsing wasted no time congratulating himself. He reached for one of the sharpened stakes and a loose brick. Sheba glared up at him, her lips drawn back in an animal growl. She was completely in the power of the vampire now, no longer human in any respect. Yet there was also a frightened pleading in her eyes, or so Van Helsing chose to believe. Audron saw it too. She's as Mahdi-driven as Van Helsing, Audron thought. He's a self-righteous, demented maniac. As murderous as she is, maybe she deserves some compassion. With an exhausting effort of will, Audron and Van Helsing reached up and popped the Mahdi out. Then back to normal text. Geez, I muttered, dropping the plastic Mahdi to the ground. It was a great relief again to be rid of Van Helsing's monomania. Meanwhile, I had little time to think. I was still trying to control the enraged Sheba, who struggled and bucked in my grasp. Bill had evidently vanquished his enemy. That's right, pal, he said, reaching for one of the fire-hardened stakes. You hold her, and I'll ostracize her. The first thing I did, while I ignored Bill, was to pop out Sheba's vampire Mahdi. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. The knowledge of what she'd done while under its influence flooded in, horrifying her. I just couldn't take it out, she gasped between loud sobs. Other Mahdis I can take or leave alone, but this one was different. I never had anything to say about it. I couldn't control myself. Once I chipped it in, that was it. I became a vampire forever. Some irresponsible programmer whipped that into the Mahdi, I said. I tried to speak in a soothing voice. I no longer feared or hated Sheba. I felt only immense sadness. She just collapsed in tears, as if she hadn't heard me. Hey, Bill said proudly. You noticed that I took care of my guy all right? Bill, I explained warily. You were savagely going 10 rounds with a date palm. He stared at me. A date palm? Well, hell, who knows what a freak was inside it when it hit me. Maybe we should get somebody up here to exorcise that tree. It didn't hit you, Bill. I saw the whole thing from the beginning. Bill scratched uneasily with one foot at the black soil. Anyway, I think I killed it. Now I'm sorry if it's only a date palm. I gave him a reassuring smile, although I didn't really feel like it. Don't worry, Bill. I'm sure it's only stunned. He brightened considerably. That's easy for you to say, he said. I smashed both the Dracula and Van Helsing Mahdis with the brick. Who can say how much good that did, because the next homicidal Blazebrain still had plenty of murderous Mahdis to choose from at Layla's store or any of the other mod shops in the Boudiyin. I let out a deep breath and a sigh. I'd worry about those killers when the time came. I helped Sheba to her feet. She was still hysterical, but now she clung to me for comfort. Her violent sobbing was subsiding. I saw that her vampire's elongated canine teeth were fake, a body modification that Sheba had paid for at one of the Boudiyin's storefront surgical clinics. I reached up slowly and gently and pulled the fangs free. I knew Sheba had an addictive personality. There was a lot of that going around the Boudiyin these days. And although she wouldn't wear the vampire Mahdi again, she was more than likely going to become something just as dangerous to herself and to other people in the near future. Still, I thought, I could hope that the sudden awareness of what she'd done would get her to seek help. There was nothing more that I could do for her now. The rest was up to Sheba herself. Just as my own future would be shaped in part by the Mahdis I bought and wore. Heck, I'd just come very close to killing a seriously troubled young woman while I was under the influence of the Van Helsing Mahdi. I was certainly in no position to judge her. That gave me an awful lot to think about, but I could put that off until later, or tomorrow, or some other time. Right then, I turned my attention to Musa Ali's little sister. I untied her and satisfied myself that, although she was exhausted and terrified, she was otherwise unharmed. Bill bent down and picked her up in his arms. He always got along well with children. As the Boudiyin characters began to arrive at the cemetery, drawn by the shouting and racket of our small war with the undead, I took Sheba's arm and led her out of the graveyard, back down the street to her long unused apartment. As of that moment, all she had was hope. I really liked that one. Married in the Trail of Blood by George Alec Effinger. Effinger? I don't know. It has a fun tone that I've always appreciated and wish that I could pull off. Like, I don't write much, but I always admire this kind of, like, you somehow know not only how to sprinkle in humor, but you actually know how to be funny. I'm impressed. It isn't just like a whole bunch of memes dumped in here, but like actual interesting characters who play off each other in a fun way. I really like this world and this character. They're pretty well defined, so he's probably already in another book. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like this is a world that has vampires in it naturally. I'm glad that we got this, though. It's a sweet little story. A sweet, funny little story. And I will want to check them out later, even if they haven't written a vampire book. I read other things occasionally. Okay, the next one is the last one, and it is short and sweet. Sister Death by Jane Yolen. You have to understand, it is not the blood. It was never the blood. I swear that on my own child's heart, though I came at last to bear the taste of it, sweetly salted, as warm as milk from the breast. The first blood I had was from a young man named Abel, and I did not kill him. His own brother had already done that, striking him down in the middle of a quarrel over sheep and me. The brother preferred the sheep. How like a man. Then the brother called me a whore. His vocabulary was remarkably basic, though it might have been the shock of his own brutality. The name itself did not offend me. It was my profession, after all. He threw me down on my face in the bloody dirt and treated me like one of his beloved Hueys. Hueys? The lamb things. I thought it was the dirt I was eating. It was blood. Then he beat me on the head and back with the same stick he had used on his brother, till I knew only night. Billia, like my name. Wow, how did I miss so many words I don't know how to say? How long I lay there, unmoving, I was never to know. But when I came to, the bastard was standing over me with the authorities, descrying my crime, and I was taken as a murderess, the only witnesses to my innocence. Though how can one call a whore innocent? Were a murderer and a flock of sheep. Was it any wonder I was condemned to die? Oh, how I ranted in that prison. I cursed the name of God, saying, let the day be darkness wherein I was born, and let God not inquire about it, for the little does he care. A woman is nothing in his sight, and a man is all, be he a murderer or a thief. Then I vowed not to die at all, but to live to destroy the man who would destroy me. I cried, and I vowed, and then I called on the demonkin to save me. I remembered the taste of blood in my mouth, and offered that up to any who would have me. One must be careful of such prayers. The night before I was to be executed, Lord Beelzebub himself entered my prison. How did I know him? He insinuated himself through the keyhole as mist, reforming at the foot of my pallet. There were 2 stubby black horns on his forehead. His feet were like pig's trotters. He carried around a tail as sinuous as a serpent. His tongue, like an adder's, was black and forked. You do not want a man, Alec, he said, using the pretty pet name my mother called me. A demon can satisfy you in ways even you cannot imagine. I am done with love-making, I answered, wondering that he could think me desirable. After a month in the prison, I was covered with sores. Except for giving one a moment's pleasure, it brings nothing but grief. The mist shaped itself grandly. This, he said, pointing, is more than a moment's worth. You will be well repaid. You can put that, I gestured back, into another keyhole. Mine is locked forever. One does not lightly ignore a great lord's proposal, nor make light of his offerings. It was one of the first things I had learned, but I was already expecting to die in the morning, and horribly. So, where would I spend his coin? Lilake, hear me, Lord Beelzebub said, his voice no longer cozening, but black as a burnt cauldron. Shema was the word he used. I had not known that demons could speak the Lord God's holy tongue. I looked up, then, amazed, and saw, through the disguise, this was no demon at all, but the Lord God himself testing me. Though why he should desire a woman, and a whore at that, I could not guess. I know you, Adonai, I said, but God or demon, my answer is the same. Women and children are nothing in your sight. You are a bringer of death. a maker of carrion. His black aspect melted then. The trotters disappeared. The horns became trendles of white hair. He looked chastened and sad and held out his hand. I disdained it, turning over on my straw bed and putting my face to the wall. It is no easy thing being at the beginning and at the end, he said. And so you will see, my daughter. I shall let you live, and forever. You will see the man Cain die, not once, but often. It will bring you no pleasure. You will be death's sister, chaste till the finish of all time, your mouth filled with the blood of the living. So saying, he was gone, fading like the last star of night fading into dawn. Of course I was still in prison, so much for the promises of God. At length I rose from the mattress. I could not sleep. Believing I had but hours before dying, I did not wish to waste a moment of the time left, though each moment was painful. I walked to the single window where only a sliver of moon was visible. I put my hands between the bars and clutched at the air as though I could hold it in my hands. And then, as if the air itself had fallen in love with me, it gathered me up through the bars, lifted me through the prison wall, and deposited me onto the bosom of the dawn, and I was somehow, inexplicably, free. Free, as I have been these 5,000 years. Oh, the years have been kind to me. I have not aged. I have neither gained nor lost weight, nor grayed, nor felt the pain of advancing years. The blood has been kind to me, the blood I nightly take from the dying children, the true innocents, the Lord God's own. Yet for all the children I have sucked rather than suckled, there has been only one I have taken for mine. I go to them all, you understand. There is no distinction. I take the ones who breathe haltingly, the ones who are misused, the ones whose bodies are ill-shaped in the womb, the ones whom fire or famine or war cut down. I take them and suck them dry and send them, desiccated little souls, to the Lord God's realm. But as clear-eyed as I had been when I cast out in my prison, so clear-eyed would a child need to be to accept me as I am and thus become my own. So for these 5,000 years there has been no one for me in my lonely occupation but my mute companion, the angel of death. If I could still love, he is the one I would desire. His wings are the color of sun and air, as mine are fog and fire. Each of the veins in those wings are hymnals of ivory. He carries the keys to heaven in his pocket light. Yet he is neither man nor woman, neither demon nor God. I call the angel he, for as I am sister death, he is surely my brother. We travel far on our daily hunt. We are not always kind. But the child, my child, I will tell you of her now. It is not a pretty tale. As always we travel, the angel and I, wingtips apart over a landscape of doom. War is our backyard, famine our feast. Most fear the wind of our wings, and even, in their hunt, pray for life. Only a few, a very few, truly pray for death, but we answer all their prayers with the same coin. This particular time we were tracking across the landscape of the Pale, where grass grew green and strong right up to the iron railings that bore the boxcars along. In the fields along the way, the peasants swung their silver scythes in rhythm to the trains. They did not hear the counterpoint of cries from the cars, or, if they did, they showed their contempt by stopping and waving gaily as the death trains rolled past. They did not see my brother Death and me riding the screams but inches overhead. But they would see us in their own time. In the cars below, jammed together like cattle, the people vomited and pissed on themselves, on their neighbors, and prayed. Their prayers were like vomit too, being raw and stinking and unstoppable. My companion looked at me, tears in his eyes. I loved him for his pity. Still crying, he plucked the dead to him like faded flowers, looking like a bridegroom waiting for the feast. And I, no bride, flew through the slats to suck dry a child held overhead for air. He needed none. A girl crushed by the door, I took her as well. A teenager, his head split open by a soldier's gun, died unnoticed against a wall. He was on the cusp of change, but would never now be a man. His blood was bitter in my mouth, but I drank it all. What are Jews, that nations swat them like flies, that the angel of death picks their faded blooms, that I drink the blood, now bitter, now sweet, of their children. The train came at last to a railway yard that was ringed about with barbs. Berkenau read the station sign. It creaked back and forth in the wind. Birkenau. When the train slowed, then stopped, and the doors pushed open from the outside, the living got out. The dead were already gathered up to their God. My companion followed the men and boys, and I flew right above the weeping women and their weeping children, as I had done all these years. There was another angel of death that day, standing in the midst of the madness. He hardly moved. Only his finger seemed alive, an organism in itself, choosing the dead, choosing the living. Please, Herr General, a boy cried out, I am strong enough to work. But the finger moved, and having writ, moved on. To the right, boy, to the arms of Lilith, Belial, the lake. Will we get out? A child whispered to its mother. We will get out, she whispered back. But I have been here many times before. You will only get out of here through the chimney, I said. Neither mother nor child nor general himself heard. There were warning signs at the camp. Beware, they said. Tension wire, they said. There were other signs, too. Pits filled with charred bones. Prisoners whose faces were imprinted with the bony mask of death. Jedem das Sein. Each one gets what he deserves. Seine. No. Jedem das Seine. In the showers, the naked mothers held their naked children to them. They were too tired to scream, too tired to cry. They had no tears left. Only one child, a 7-year-old, stood alone. Her face was angry. She was now resigned. She raised her fist and looked at the heavens, and then, a little lower, at me. Surprised, I looked back. The showers began their rain of poison, coughing, praying, calling on God to save them. The women died with their children in their arms. The child alone did not cough, did not pray, did not call on God. She held out her 2 little hands to me. To me. Ima, she said. Mother. I trembled, flew down, and took her in my arms. Then we flew through the walls as if they were air. So I beg you, as you love life, as you master death, let my brother be the sole harvester. I have served my 5,000 years. Not once did I complain. But give me a mother's span with my child, and I will serve you again till the end of time. This child alone chose me in all those years. You could not be so cruel a God as to part us now. Fuck. What a deep, fucked up story. Okay. Sister Death by Jane Yolen. And we are done with that book. We've read it all. Yeah. Or I've read it all. Empty, the blood beast, Madeline, Mama, survivor skills, tumbling down the nighttime, La Dame, sometimes salvation in the blood, victims, Maurid in the trail of blood, food chain, song of the night people, and Sister Death. Woo, damn, I need a drink. My throat. All in all, even though it has less stories, I kind of like it more than the first book that we read, which was like 50 stories. No, it was like 500 pages and like 30 stories. There were a lot of really mid ones, but this one is a really nice collection. There's only maybe like 2 I don't really care for. Maybe? I don't know. What is that? I do have another book lined up, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. Instead, I'm going to drink my water and stare into the camera. Hello. How are you? What do you think? What do you think about vampires? What do you think about lip gloss? I don't really want to stop streaming because I like to go into 8 o'clock. So maybe I'll read another journal or something. I still have them on my computer saved. Ones that are pretty short. Sure wanna already start with a between book stream. Maybe, I don't know. Why the fuck not, right? Hello. We are now officially between books. So, oh my god, it's 10 pages. Never mind. What about this one? This one is 9. I have half an hour, please. 8.
think I'm kinda gay. Willow Rosenberg and the absent present bisexual and Buffy the Vampire Slayer is 9 pages. Is one of them notes? Nice, it is. Okay. Ooh. Works cited too. Nice. Okay, sure. I'm glad I saved that setting. Okay. We're gonna finish off the night with a 9-page story about being bisexual in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Listen, that's vampire adjacent. It's vampire adjacent, and it's good enough for me, and I'm running this book club, so get over it. Okay, let's see if we can read this in half of an hour. I got this bottle from Five Below, one of the really, like, silly ones that are like, you need to drink this much in one day. Drink 2 cups every hour or something. And it's like, you can do it, you can go, keep going. It's 9 o'clock. It's kind of working. I don't always have enough. I drink a lot of tea. I don't always have enough tea prepared to start the day off at 100%. So I don't actually know how much I'm drinking throughout the day. None of this matters. I think I'm kinda gay. Willow Rosenberg and the absent/present bisexual in Buffy the Vampire Slayer from the Slayage literary journal magazine that is now defunct. Okay. Kennedy, let's start with the easy stuff. How long have you known that you were gay? Willow, wait, that's easy? The Killer in Me, Season 7, Episode 13. Bisexuality has often occupied an ambiguous cultural status. Subsumed within heterosexual and homosexual representations and histories, bisexuality has rarely been explicitly coded as bisexuality. Marjorie Garber, in her mammoth work Vice Versa, suggests that bisexuality is commonly understood by 2 apparently contradictory truisms. Either everybody is bisexual, the pop Freudian view, or no one is. And the second, bisexuals are at best self-delusional about their desires and practices, at worst simply untruthful. Both truisms work together to systematically erase the bisexual subject, and the first colonizing bisexuality by disregarding its differences from other forms of sexual identity, and the second suggesting bisexuality to be inauthentic or simply impossible. Ever just, like, feel like a huge nerd? Why does this stuff make me happy? And why am I reading it on my vampire channel? Listen, it's vampire adjacent, and we just finished the book, and I don't feel like logging off yet. Fuck. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is notable for being one of the few shows on American network television to have featured a long-term, loving queer relationship. It was nominated for a number of GLAAD awards for its portrayal of the Willow/Tara relationship, which was as subtle and complex as any on the show have been. The story arc of Willow Rosenberg sees her go from diffident computer geek with an unrequited crush on Xander to a relationship with the male werewolf Oz, the eventual ending of that relationship, to relationships with fellow witch Tara and Slayer potential Kennedy. In short, a not uncommon coming out narrative. Even though, after coming out, Willow briefly retains the possibility of a future relationship with Oz, by and large, she seems to fit the usual road to Damascene conversion that characterizes coming out stories, a model which of course works for many gay and lesbian people. However, there are a number of ways in which Willow could be just easily reimagined as a bisexual subject. As Claire Hemmings points out, for bisexual scholars, the need for this reimagining is precisely because of a lack of a clear bisexual narrative, a lack of spaces where bisexuality is read as bisexual. This re-examining will inevitably be not merely the familiar project of queering heterosexuality, but of problematizing notions of fixed gay and lesbian identities, of queering the already queer without that necessarily meaning a recourse to heteronormativity. And doing so, the project of producing a specifically bisexual reading requires quotidian from other imaginaries, lesbian, gay, straight, swinging. What occurs me, then, as a multiple desiring scholar, is tracing the ways in which bisexuality does and does not appear in Buffy. In particular, I shall focus on the character of Willow Rosenberg, who is, as Jez Baptiste evocatively puts it, a hybrid site upon which several of the show's most resounding ambivalences converge, overlap, and shadow each other. Sex, gender, desire. In one of the founding texts of queer theory, Judith Butler in Gender Trouble argues that heteronormativity is produced in a culture that suggests heterosexual genders and sexuality to be natural and innate and to confirm each other. She says that gender can denote a unity of experience of sex, gender, and desire. Only when sex can be understood in some sense of to necessitate gender, where gender is a psychic and or cultural designation of the self, and desire, where desire is heterosexual and therefore designates itself through an oppositional relation to that gender it desires. For Butler, the sex-gender-desire matrix works to regulate subjects as both heterosexual and normatively gendered. She argues that heterosexual genders and sexualities work to confirm each other. Desire expresses gender, and gender expresses desire. Gender thus naturalizes heterosexuality, presuming the gendered coherence of both self and desired other. Butler argues, however, that unity is, in fact, merely the effect of a regulatory practice that seeks to render gender identity uniform through a compulsory heterosexuality. Heteronormativity is thus not merely the project of a compulsory heterosexuality, but of producing normatively gendered subjects. Bisexuality, however, problematizes the sex-gender desire matrix, for though it will at times be necessarily be opposite sex-related, and makes the once and forever nature of heterosexual identity impossible. Think of the hysterical denials of queerness by such comments as, but he/she's married, as though heterosexual marriage necessarily excludes the possibility of queer sex. In short, where the heterosexual act is often thought to confirm identity forever, by its nature, bisexuality does not and cannot affect such a confirmation. As Amanda Eudice Kessler puts it, bisexuality can bring about a personal and potentially collective crisis of meaning. Bisexuality calls into question unified essentialist narratives of past, present, and future, and it is precisely this crisis of meaning, indeed an excess of meaning, that is apparent in those textual moments where the possibility of a bisexual reading of Willow appears. Of course, bisexuals have often been criticized for essentialism of their own. Donna Haraway famously excluded bisexuality from her Cyborg manifesto, dismissing bisexuality as a nostalgic attempt at pre-Edenic wholeness. And Davidson et al. Pointed out that bisexuals themselves have a greater tendency to essentialize their experience, searching for ways to discover an eternal, essential bisexual truth. Bisexual can suggest a unitary essentialism to a set of desires and bodily practices that are necessarily multiple, which might seem an inherent contradiction. Additionally, the bi and bisexual suggests only desire for men and women and excludes other queer desires, practices, and identities such as transgender and genderfuck. Bisexuality can not only presume the gender stability of one's desired, but the stability of one's own gender as well. Hence, many non-essentialist queers have adopted the term pansexual to mark a more inclusive model of sexuality and gender. But given the general absence of transgendered characters from Buffy, however, the task of tracing fluid and multiple sexualities is limited to tracing the dis/appearance of bisexuality in the text. I argue that, though the series explicitly codes Willow's sexuality in essentialist binaristic terms, there are a number of instances in which she is coded as implicitly bisexual, both before and after coming out. In the alternate universe of The Wish, we see Willow as a vampire, and later again in Doppelgangland, when the doppelganger is sucked into the real Buffyverse. As has been noted frequently, Willow's doppelganger is a polymorphously kinky bisexual vampire who presages real Willow's coming out in the following season. Vamp Willow seems equally at home propositioning her vamp lover Xander as Sandy, a girl at the Bronze, playing with Puppy Angel and licking real Willow on the neck.
And a phrase that foreshadows her own coming out, Willow describes her double as so evil and skanky, and I think I'm kinda gay. But whilst these episodes could easily be read as indicators of Willow's true sexuality, and similarly her eroticized relationship to Xander and Angel as a heterosexual mistakes, it would be highly reductive to read Vamp Willow as straight or gay. Rather, it is possible to reposition her into a more nuanced bisexual reading. It is interesting to note that after Willow's coming out as a lesbian, we see instances in which bisexuality appears to rupture the stability of Willow's sexuality. In the Series 7 episode Him, for instance, Willow, like all the female characters, is attracted to RJ, unlike Spike and Xander, who remain immune to his magic Letterman jacket. Here, gender clearly determines sexuality. The efficacy of the spell suggests an essentialist relationship between sex, gender, and heterosexual desire. This brief moment of instability in Willow's identity is quickly recuperated when she tries to magically change RJ's sex, an instance of the conflation between magic and lesbianism critiqued by Edwina Bartolom and Gwyneth Bodger. Yet despite the recovery in the attraction to RJ, nevertheless represents a rupture in the coherence in the text, in which the possibility of a bisexual subject briefly appears. The Series 6 episode, Tabula Rasa, is another example of the sex/gender/desire matrix at work in Buffy. In Tabula Rasa, the Scoobies lose their memories from a misdirected spell of Willow's. Upon waking from unconsciousness, the members of the group try to reconstruct their identities based upon their clothing, their driver's licenses, and so on. Willow and Tara notice they both have UC Sunnydale student IDs, and though Tara's attraction to Willow is readily apparent, Willow makes the heteronormative assumption that they are study buddies, because she has borrowed Xander's jacket and has woken up snuggly-wuggly on Xander's shoulder. Willow makes the assumption that she and Xander are a couple, though Xander himself makes the self-effacing assumption that Willow is in fact his elder brother's girlfriend. Spike and Giles ignore the obvious class differences in their voices, decide they are father and son because of their shared Englishness, and whilst Buffy and Dawn start bickering and thus soon recognize each other as siblings. We see then, in their collective amnesia, certain reconstructions of the characters that, in varying degrees, rely on essentialist assumptions. Buffy and Dawn, for instance, despite a lack of any identification except for Dawn's necklace bearing her name, have an essential sisterness. That the characters continue to speak in their distinctive idioms. Spike's litany of Englishness, shag, knickers, bollocks, and Willow's snuggly-wuggly suggests language to be expressive rather than constructive of identity. Willow's double assumption of Xander as partner and Tara as friend then takes on added significance. Unlike Tara, though, who is immediately and obviously lesbian, Willow takes most of the episode to come to the realization that, again, she's kinda gay. The episode clearly mirrors the overall arc of Willow's coming out and can be read in a number of ways. First, there remains the possibility that the episode suggests that there are some characteristics that ring true, essential characteristics, and some that are learned and performed, and the text places Willow's sexuality in the second, a construction that might suggest Willow was born straight and became lesbian. This can be read as problematically suggesting an essential heterosexuality for Willow, but the episode can perhaps work in other ways as well. The classic coming out narrative tends to go something like this. One is born gay or lesbian, but takes time to overcome the internalization of compulsory heterosexuality and to come to the acceptance of one's gay or lesbian self. Heterosexual desire is, then, to be denied as the inauthentic attempt to enter normative heterosexuality, an odd inverse of how heterosexual identified people can dismiss their atypical queer sex as experiments. As Claire Hemmings points out, one is allowed mistakes as long as they are seen as mistakes, or as an interruption to one's true sexual identity. While coming out remains one powerful way for gays and lesbians to understand their own experience, it nevertheless works as an implicit attempt to erase the possibility of bisexuality. In beginning the episode with Willow's assuming a relationship with Xander, her first crush, Tabula Rasa perhaps suggests that Willow's early heterosexual desires cannot be entirely dismissed or forgotten, that they might remain a lingering part of her, such that one can read her as a bisexual character as easily as straight or lesbian. I think I'm kinda gay. Now let me contextualize my discussion
of the occasional appearance of Willow as bisexual by using Derrida's famous reading of Grammatology of Rousseau's use of the word supplement. Derrida ascribes I love this. This is why I'm reading it, because I am a nerd, and it's fucking... We're talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and we're bringing in fucking Rousseau guy. Like, it's insane. I love it. Please make more weird connections. It's so fun. Firstly, as it most commonly read, the supplement accumulates presence. The supplement is firstly an addition, but simultaneously, Derrida argues the supplement adds only to replace. It intervenes or insinuates itself in the place of. The supplement, therefore, adds to and replaces the sign. The bisexual slips of Willow, if I may call them so, function as supplements within the text, both adding to her identity as well as replacing. For that moment in time, gay or for straight, or straight for gay, and over time, bisexual for straight or gay. Bisexuality is an identity often read intertextually over time. After all, unless one is currently engaged in a threesome or polyamorous relationship. Indeed, I am not making the argument for Willow as really bi, or really gay, or even really straight. Rather, the construction of Willow's sexuality is incomplete, as shown in the quote by which I have titled this paper. I think I'm kinda gay. Emphasis added on kinda. Bisexuality appears as ruptures in the coherence of the hetero or homo subjects, a discursive excess between what is signified and what is claimed as an identity. This is analogous to what Kevin Hart, drawing on the work of Derrida, calls the trespass of the sign, the notion that the sign trespasses over its assigned limits, thereby blurring any qualitative distinction between the concept and the sign. In the first 3 series of Buffy, Willow is signified as heterosexual, yet episodes like the aforementioned Doppelgangland demonstrate the limits of such a signification, as well as prefiguring her future lesbian subjectivity. As any queer reading will demonstrate, the self-designated margins of a text are permeable, meaning that an ostensibly heterosexual character like Xander can be queered, and that Willow, post-Series 4, can be considered bisexual. To return again to the source of my title, uttered by Willow in Tabula Rasa, as well as in Doppelgangland, the word kinda functions as a hinge word, multiple readings stemming from the different possibilities in that one word. A dominant reading of the phrase would be to read kinda as empty, devoid of meaning, in which the statement is reconstructed in meaning totalized as merely I'm gay. Yet kinda may also function as a qualifier. If Willow is kinda gay, then implicit in the suggestion that he's also kinda not. Similarly, Willow's hello, gay now, to Anya not only recalls there was once a time that Willow was not gay, but raises the possibility that there may also be a time in the future where she may not be. Hello, gay now. It's notable, then, that those moments in which Willow seems to articulate her sexual identity most clearly also contain the possibility of their own failure. Willow's equivocations contain not only an ambivalence toward directly expressing a gay identity, but also the possibility for a more fluid sexual identity. The hinge word is symptomatic of a much larger process of language, the contestability of the sign's meaning. One should be careful not to take a nostalgic reading of the loss of the transparency of the sign, creating a pre-fall linguistic utopia of a stable language of presence. As Hart said, there is not a fall from full presence, but, as it were, a fall within presence, an inability of presence to fulfill its promise of being able to form a ground. Derrida's analysis does not produce any positions outside language. As his well-known aphorism, there is nothing outside of the texts attests. Derrida's work has proved productive itself for queer and feminist critics, for the inability of any sign to totalize meaning offers the possibility for critique of any universalized truth claim, and with the emergence of a Butlerian identity as performance of essentialist claims of any sort of fixed identity. Did that sentence make any sense to you? Because it does not to me. It is the gaps in a text, in this case Buffy, that offer the opportunity for resistant readings and critique. To return to Willow, the gaps by which I am reading present the opportunity to show the ways in which bisexuality appears unacknowledged, which have been glossed by the apparent simplicity of statements as, hello? Gay now? Rather than simply oscillating between a straight lesbian binary, to register the appearance of bisexuality in Buffy as a supplemental access is to begin to think through sexuality as transitive, as becoming, to steal a phrase from Deleuze and Guattari rather than being. Evil queers. Judith Halberstam argues that monsters have to be everything that the human is not, and in producing the negative of human, make way for the invention of the human as white, male, middle class, and heterosexual. Whilst Buffy does at times revise this formula, say in the figure of the quintessentially straight, white Major Wilkins, as often as not, the monstrous works precisely as Halberstam describes. Thus, it is not coincidental that Willow is most strongly coded as queer the 2 times that she is evil. Thus, that is monstrous. Tonya Kristine suggests that, as with most Hollywood films, Buffy uses very direct means to underline the current nature of a split nature. She argues that evilness is visually coded through such devices as Bad Willow's black lipstick and leather and Angel's smoking. Both times Willow is coded as evil, she's implicitly coded as bisexual, a bisexuality marked by excess. The first is prior to her coming out, Willow's vampire double from the alternative universe of The Wish. Vamp Willow is the clearest example of a bisexual Willow, for though she is involved with Vamp Xander, she propositions men and women alike, from Angel to Sandy, a girl at the Bronze in Doppelgangland, to regular Willow. When taken with her puppy play with Angel in The Wish, the BDSM connotations are clear. The polymorphous inverse of Willow's vanilla loving relationship with Oz, and later with Tara too. Indeed, there is an ongoing association between BDSM and bisexuality on Buffy. BDSM and bisexuality both appear in Buffy and Angel as a very clear part of vamp sexuality. Of the many queer instances one could cite, there is a very definite homoeroticism to Drusilla and Darla's relationship, and Spike's confession that Angel and me were never that close, except that one time. And substituting all body pain for the phallus, vamp sexuality arguably breaks free of heteronormative penetrative logic. So even when explicitly heterosexual, as Vib Burr notes, vampire relationships are sadistically and explicitly sadistic, with violence as a sexual appetizer. For instance, Spike's sexuality is clearly kinky. Buffy says, "You're in love with pain," as is Drusilla's, "Spank us to Tuesday," and Darla's, "You're hurting me, that's good too." But as Burr notes, though Buffy makes BDSM visible, it does not endorse non-normative sexual practices, and it can only do this because those engaging in SM practices are mostly presented as non-human. So it's worth remembering this association between bisexuality, soulless vampirism, and BDSM kink then in the light of Justine Larbalestier's assertion that in the Buffyverse, sex and a loving relationship is good, and sex that is not about love is bad, or at the very least, empty. Unlike Buffy's ongoing flirtation with darkness, Willow's relationships are framed as desexualized and most definitely vanilla. Flora Mendelssohn's notes that sex with Oz occurs off-screen, while Willow's relationship with Tara neutralizes her sexuality and then rechannels thoughts of lesbian relationships in a safe direction. Vamp sexuality, on the other hand, is coded as dangerous or violent, and there indeed is a stark contrast between regular vanilla Willow and the polymorphous queerness of Vamp Willow. Lastly, as well as bisexuality and BDSM, Vamp Willow recalls the myth of queerness as narcissism by propositioning her alternate self. She asks one to be naughty and licks real Willow's neck, a queer act which also has a distinctly masturbatory feel about it. These associations overlay each other, creating a profoundly overdetermined queer subject, desiring women, men, and self, all outside of the bounds of normative, vanilla heterosexuality. The vamp double is clearly framed by the text as perverse, a cautionary example of excessive sexuality. The other time Willow is coded as evil and implicitly bisexual is in her rampage after Tara's death at the end of Series 6. Tara? I don't even remember. Have I been calling her Tara the whole time? Is she Tara? I haven't seen an episode in years. I'm just reading this because I'm a nerd. Okay, hold on. Fuck me. Oh, isn't it fun being an idiot? The other time Willow is coded evil and implicitly bisexual is in her rampage after Tara's death at the end of Series 6. Here she is again, coded as queer, wearing a phallic black suit, her usual red hair turned black, as are her eyes. If she is not exactly butch, she is certainly far more butch than in her usual flowing, New Age-styled Celtic clothes. Willow's evilness, then, is immediately identifiable by the gender trouble posed by female masculinity, to use Halberstam's fallacious phrase. The plot arc marks the appearance of an explicitly queer gender. The queerness of Willow and Tara as femmes, one suspects, have been largely lost on Buffy's predominantly heterosexual audience. Bartlam argues that Willow's apocalyptic rampage is that of the evil lesbian, a new version of those lesbian-coded femme fatales, psychotic killers, and supernatural beings that have long represented hegemonic heterosexuality's fears of queerness. The evil lesbian as a trope encompasses the vampire queens of horror movies, the lesbian killers of the pulps, as well as more recent queer-coded villains like the infamously bisexual Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct. Bartlam suggests that in this sequence, Willow becomes the archetypal, vengeful, and destructive woman. Her nascent butchness arguably redoubles the evil lesbian queer coding, but it is also possible, however, that the arc is more ambiguous than Bartlam proposes. For one, whilst God, I want to use that in a sentence just casually one day. Whilst you are off doing things, I am here. I don't know. What am I bitching at my ex? For one, whilst I agree that Willow is coded as explicitly queer in her rampage, the arc also codes her as implicitly both bisexual and kinky, a common enough trope on Buffy, as I have mentioned with regard to vamp sexuality. There are a number of parallels between Willow's evil vamp twin and her appearance in the Series 6 finale, particularly her repetition of Vamp Willow's "bored now." And again, Willow shifts from a loving but vanilla relationship into an excessive, perverse, bisexual subject. Her relationship with the magic dealer Rack is sexualized. He says she tastes like strawberries, and she calls Dawn cutie. So while, as Bartlam suggests, that Willow's rampage is symbolically associated with an addiction to lesbian sex, it is notable that heterosexual desire also appears at this time, as if to warn of the dangers of boundary crossing. And significantly, too, her queer desire is at its most perverse with Dawn, besides the obvious age difference, given that Willow and Tara became Dawn's de facto parents after Buffy's death. The sexual come-on to Dawn takes on a quasi-incestuous meaning as well. Once again, we see how bisexuality appears as a symbolic excess, one which is conflated with monstrosity, with evilness. Willow is at her most sexual when she is evil, when she is implicitly bisexual. We see her in her magic rampage, a contradictory construction by which she is coded as both evil lesbian and bisexual pervert, sexualizing all of her exchanges. Gonna end this stream and we're gonna go be bisexual perverts. Thus, lesbian, heterosexual, and bisexual overlay each other. The overdetermination of queerness results in a suggestive if unacknowledged, bisexuality at the same time as pathology collides with an explicitly queer coding of both gender and sexuality. The question arises then, why does the specter of bisexuality appear most strongly in those episodes in which Willow is coded as evil? The figures of Vamp and Evil Willow allay an excessive sexuality associated with both bisexuality and BDSM kink with a non-normatively gendered female masculinity. In this, Buffy is perhaps not as different from the homophobic norms of American TV as many of its fans, myself included, would like. Whilst the characterization undoubtedly affords viewers the pleasures of queer and kinky readings, it is problematic to foreground those subversive readings at the expense of acknowledging the conservative cultural work such constructions may do. As Vivian Burr argues with regard to PDSM on Buffy, the sexuality is not really being offered to us as a viable choice. It is only something bad vampires do. But bisexuality need not necessarily be characterized as excessive, or of a barely acknowledged kinda outside of the realms of legible sexual identity. As Claire Hemmings points out, the notion of bisexuality as outside is, of course, absolutely produced through existing structures of sexual identity. How could Buffy have attempted to show a non-pathologized bisexual subject in Willow? At the time, a number of American shows, Ally McBeal, Party of Five, were making mileage out of a flirtation with femme-coded lesbian sex, but rapidly retreating back into normative heterosexuality, which is something that, to his credit, Buffy creator Joss Whedon very clearly wished to avoid. Yet bisexuality need not be necessarily recoverable by the heterosexist economy of desire. To problematize any aspect of the sex/gender/desire matrix is to problematize it all, to queer it. Whilst Buffy allows enough gaps for the able critic to trace a bisexual subject presence and its apparent absence, the task of more fully representing a queer-coded bisexuality remains to be taken up by other writers and shows. And we're excited. Coming out on A Mouth of Hell. She's not all grown up yet. I feel like we read at least one of these. Maybe just the title. Look at all these cool, we're excited. Ooh, notes. I don't feel like reading these, though I would have before. Fuck it. Hello. Again. I don't know why I do that. I'm done for the night. My throat hurts. Thank you for reading another journal with me. It was a lot of fun being a nerd. I think that it's important to not just read a story as a story with, characters and plot and whether or not you think that the characters made good decisions, analyzing it from a story standpoint, but analyzing it in a broader sense of what we're doing with these characters and these stories and why. And it's really interesting to really read other people's opinions, whether you agree or not necessarily going to the fucking literary fucking philosophy freaks or whatever, but downloading some shit off of the Wayback Machine about Buffy the Vampire Slayer and seeing if you feel at the end that you are a dirty, kinky bisexual or not. That's not at all the point of, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. dirty, kinky bisexuals raise up and end the stream. Fuck. Okay, my ending. Fuck, where's my ending? Oh my god. I'm so sorry. I somehow lost the page. I don't
don't know what's happening. And I just, oh, fuck me. Fuck me, I don't know what's happened. I closed the page and then I needed to stay open. Whatever. I like to do these streams on Sunday, Eastern Standard Time, 6 o'clock. Like I said at the beginning, not gonna read a book next week. Probably do a middle between book stream. Not sure what yet. Don't know if I'm gonna torture you guys more with these insane journal readings or not. But we'll find out next week, won't we? If you made it to the end, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And yeah, I will